Hello traders, welcome to another daily analysis. Today is November 11th, Friday. So Friday, as you know, today this week, as mentioned, it's very light economic data week, and today is no exception. We do not have any tier 1 data. Basically, the whole market is still surrounded and driven by the sentiment, which came after the US election. So really no single piece of fundamental data or piece of news has large enough impact than the post-US election. Right now, the market is still digesting it, slowly getting used to the new president-elect, Donald Trump, and just slowly, getting back on their feet, basically. So right now, the sentiment, as mentioned yesterday, I'm saying that although the sentiment is positive, it should continue to be positive. I mean, of course, you have to watch out for what Donald Trump is going to say. But if all things remain the same for now, it is actually going to be positive. But no matter how positive it is, you gotta understand that market composed by people, and right now it's Friday, it's weekend, so you're always going to have a profit taking coming in, which is going to shift sentiment a little bit. But in terms of what's going to happen next week, just by the news and all the information I'm reading right now, I do actually have a quite positive outlook for US dollar, because now we'll get into that actually later on. And let me just go over my regular daily analysis for today. So again, there's no tier 1 data. We have FOMC members speaks, Bank of Canada, Powell speaks. Really nothing really particularly important at this point. As I mentioned, that all the central banks right now, at least for this week, really their best tactic is to try to calm the market, because right now, still a lot of people are still very upset and still very fearful about the future, as you're still seeing a lot of anti-Trump protests still happening in US. So central banks, I think all the officials, they're trying to do it just to calm everyone down. And that's why you see Obama and Trump had that kind of dramatic moment. They suddenly become, best friend. And that's just interesting about politicians. But anyhow, so WTI actually had a solid down day, and most equity are also down today. And it's no surprise, as I said, Friday or whenever you see a consecutive up day, it is inevitable to see some profit taking down day. And same thing apply if you see a consecutive down day, you're always going to see one or two green day for people to take profit, for the short seller to buy it back. Now, but the WTI actually had a real fundamental negativities, and I wrote a little bit outlook for the week. It's just more long-term perspective, but I'm just gonna read it to you. This is more easier. So WTI, what happened is that the OPEC member, as mentioned, had a lot of conflicts, a lot of differences, and right now the data actually showed they have a large oil surplus, a large buildup. So what's going on? Didn't they say they're going to curb the oil output? Yes, but you gotta understand that the market function on supply and demand, and this supply and demand has to be natural. That means that if you naturally have more supply than demand, the price will go down. If naturally you have more demand than supply, then the price will go up. So what happens is that sometimes government, official, or organization will try to artificially control the supply and demand. And if you look at history, more often than that, this does not work and often end up fail. What happened in 2014 in the S&P is that they try to control the demand for Swiss franc. So they don't want people to keep buying Swiss franc because they want their currency to remain low to help the export. So the central bank keep intervene up to a point that they use all the bullet, basically. They just say, I cannot do this anymore. And the reason is because whenever you are against a natural force, there is always going to be a certain limitation of time and energy and money and resources that eventually going to be run out. So what happened to OPEC is that they're trying to artificially curb the oil output. And eventually that really require everyone to become absolutely selfless, absolutely following the rules, no one can cheat. Basically, if we say, hey, let's not produce this much, then some of us will always want to cheat, because he will think, okay, if you guys are not producing, not selling, then if I break the rule, I'm gonna be the only one to make money. Yeah, that's great. Unfortunately, that thought happened in everyone, and then eventually the agreement collapsed. So that's what happened to the OPEC right now. And that's why I really don't have too much positive faith in terms of the OPEC, or what the member can do. And on top of that, exactly what happened? Why do we have more oil supply? Don't we remember back then we don't have enough oil? Well, right now the technology has shifted. Now that, especially in Canada, you have this oil sand, you have a lot of new technology. So we actually have a lot of way to produce oil nowadays. But the most important thing is that the global recession has never been completely over yet. So ever since 2008, 2009, we're really still in this recovery period, and then we never really got back to where we used to be back in 2000 or 1990. So what happened is that the demand basically is slowed down for the whole business manufacturing. That's why, just look at the natural supply and demand. Of course, you're gonna have less demand for oil, and now you have more supply for oil, and then the oil price is going to go down. Of course, that's going to affect the currency most is the Canadian dollar. And as mentioned, that already is a big factor for the Bank of Canada to take into consideration. On top of that, right now, we are actually looking very bullish, as mentioned, in terms of US dollar. Now, the reason is, let's just don't talk about Donald Trump for now. Let's talk about the Parliament, the Congress. The whole Congress right now is a Republican-controlled Congress. And Republicans are always in favor for more business deal. So now basically, everyone will have one agenda in mind, that is to make our nation, when I say our, it's not really my nation, but when our agenda is to make American become as rich, as great as possible. And sometimes they do that on the price for other weak nations. So you can say that right now, yes, they are really looking for their benefit. And then that's all going to be very well for US itself. So that's why I'm really actually looking very positive for the future of US. Yes, it's going, what happened now, you have to look at the global events. And I understand this is like when you go into high school and you have a lot of cool kids. And the cool kids, some of them, they are so cool, they are so powerful, their parents are very rich, and they become big bully. But what happens is that the bully hang out with other bully, and they start forming these gangs. And then you, as a weaker person, really have no other way to say. All you can do is try to avoid conflict, or crying to your teacher, or basically just quit school altogether. All right, and I'm just saying it's right. I'm just saying looks like that's what's happening right now. So although we keep saying it's a populist movement, but honestly, right now I really don't feel it's a populist movement, because now really the money and the control, the power really goes back to the people who have more resources. So what US is going to do from now on, I really think it's really particularly 100% for their own benefit. And you can already see the protests, anti-Trump protests, are all from women, minority group. And that's considered a more, a weaker groups that needs more help. So what happened is that it already happened in the civil movement, and also, the Black Lives Matter, things like that. And now these voices are most likely going to be ignored by the government, because now really people are looking forward to the benefit of the US. So what's gonna happen is going to be very bullish for US dollar altogether. Now, the only risk people have is that what if Trump really exercised the isolationism policy, that he's really going to isolate US? But I'm trying to just refer you back to the history, is that back in World War II, that was exactly, and World War I, that was exactly what US did. They were never involved, they were a neutral country, and they basically isolated themselves from any global event. So back then, people say, help us. In Europe, they say, help us, we have this concentration camp from Nazi, we need help, we need humanitarian help. And what happens is US did not really help. You say, oh yeah, people like Einstein got into US. Yes, because they are very smart and it's very beneficial for US. So basically what happened, again, I keep saying the history always repeats itself. For me, I think that's the future is happening right now. So what happened is that although the isolationism policy, people think it's going to do harm to US, but that might not necessarily be the case, because people might actually have no other choice but to invest in US, because that's the only country that is out of the chaos of the world right now. So you have the Germany trying to do the humanitarian work, taking millions of refugees, actually going to sink their own economy. And whether I'm not saying I like it or not, but what happens is that people have no other choice but to power their money into the United States. So for me, either way, how Trump is going to isolate the country, I'm very bullish toward the US dollar right now. Even though the Federal Reserve might not hike the rate in December, I don't really care. I think the US dollar is really, really strong and the economy is really looking well. Now, of course, the only country that might be able to battle it is really lies down to China. And the reason is because, again, China is another country that is looking particularly 100% to their own benefit. So that's really, I'm not saying it's good for the world, but it's just good for the country itself. So China is going to be another country that is very favored for this movement. And what's countries are going to be benefit on that, of course, it's going to be Australia. So Australia, again, is another good currency for a long-term perspective. As long as China keep growing, Australia will be very beneficial for that due to their commodity export. And the other country that are going to be benefit from China, of course, is New Zealand dollar. So these two countries in the South Hemisphere are actually far away from the world chaotics, and they are going to really play the similar personality as US, but in a much more relaxed point of view. So Australia and New Zealand dollar are also something I'm very looking forward to invest in. Now, what other currency is, let's talk about euro dollar. So euro is actually, for me, the worst currency right now. And the reason is because after the Trump win, now you are going to have a lot of new populist movement. A lot of, left-wing movement is going to come up right now. So what happened is that Italy is going to have a referendum next month. France is going to have election, and Germany is going to have election. So you have so many possibility that any of the country, or not even this major country, any of the Euro countries can very much vote to leave Eurozone. And that would be the nightmare for Angela Merkel. And that would be the end of the Eurozone. So really, what's the future of Euro? I really not looking forward to that. So definitely no one wants to put their money or eggs into the Euro. So I'm actually very, very bearish toward Euro dollar right now. And another one is the British pound. Now, British pound has a very interesting position. If Euro, as predicted, become a very worse situation, that's actually very favorable for UK. But first of all, UK, as mentioned, left Eurozone and felt like the only loser. And then after the US election, now they realize what UK has done was actually not that bad. What UK has done was actually a pioneer. So back then, people thought UK screw itself up, but in reality, they become a pioneer. So if we have more country is about to leave Euro, or we have more events happening in Euro, the UK is actually going to be very beneficial. And then it's actually going to become its own country, basically. It has already become its own country. But it's going to be very beneficial for British pound, because that's going to be the connection to the European continent without investing directly into euro dollar. And that's already happened. A lot of corporations already taking advantage of the pound depreciation. So pound is actually something I'm actually not that, used to be very bearish, but since the US election, now the outlook has changed. I'm not actually that bearish toward British pound right now. And what's left, of course, is Japanese yen and Swiss franc. Now, Japanese yen and Swiss franc really has nothing too much to say. They both are just still a very, troubled country, but yet very strong domestically in their economy. So these two countries basically is going to be there forever, and their currency are still very attractive, especially if the world is in a chaotic situation. And they both are working toward the same goal, that is to hit their inflation target. And they're both trying to help their exporters to do the business, because they both are very small country without any resources, so they need the trade to survive. So basically that's they do nothing really much going on for them. Yes, they both are going to keep easing, they both are going to keep cutting rate. That's just the the natural outcome for it. And Japan, of course, next year 2018 is going to have the Olympics. It's going to be a good event, and looking forward to that. Basically, actually nothing to do with what I'm talking today. Just a side note. Okay, so let's get into our chart and just to see what happened today and maybe this week. So let's take a look at daily first, to our 28 pairs. And of course, first thing first, let's talk about my current trade. So my Aussie New Z trade is here. So today, yesterday in my analysis, if you are my members, you can get free member. By the way, just sign up. It's a free, completely free. So but yesterday I was saying that I'm going to micro monitor my trade, because I was not really certain how the sentiment shift is going to affect Australian dollar. And today, yes, the sentiment did shift. That's why we have equity market closing down, oil market closing down. However, Australian dollar actually performed way much better than New Zealand dollar. I'm very happy about that, because that shows a lot of strength into the confidence right now, that even though today the risk is off, but people are still buying Australian dollar price in for weeks to come. Because right now, really the biggest, you can say the scariest events of 2016, which is the US election, has passed. And that really give a lot of relaxation to people, because what's you gonna do when the worst is already gone, right? And now, of course, I know a lot of pessimistic people say that the worst is about to begin, but you gotta be realistic and logic to look at the global micro view. So it's actually a very good signal today. Nevertheless, I still move my stop loss to break even, and the reason is because we already tried to touch this 200-day EMA once, and we fail. Now, if we touch and fail again, I'm not surprised to see another retrace back. So in this kind of case, I don't really want to sit through this kind of up and down drawdown. If I'm already, almost hit my one-on-one risk reward ratio, I always try to put into break even. Now, it doesn't mean I will take profit, but it just means this is a risk-free trade for me. And personally, that's exactly what my outlook is in terms of trading, is to always reduce the risk and ultimately remove the risk. Of course, you cannot remove 100%, but ultimately remove the risk as much as you can. So this is already a break-even trade. Not worry about it. I'm going to keep tightening up my stop loss next week, if providing we still have a pretty good risk on sentiment. Okay, so the euro today versus pound, of course, as I mentioned, continue to sink for euro dollar. But just look at that, you have a very strong support at this area right now, which you just broke down. But the setting has reduced, so we might see some reversal next week and then continue the downtrend. Nobody knows, so we will keep a close eye on it. But as I mentioned, fundamentally, ironically, British pound actually, because of the US election, now it become more bullish than euro. Euro Swiss again keep dropping. It's no surprise that euro dollar is really from my point of view, is the most bearish currency right now. Euro Aussie, it's actually an update, and that's very interesting. As I mentioned, because of the Australian dollar, it's actually favorable for risk on sentiment. So we can take a look at Aussie dollar right now. Aussie Swiss is a down day. Aussie dollar is also a down day. Aussie CAD is also a down day, and Aussie Yen is also a down day. So a very, very interesting view is that I was just saying that the Australian dollar was okay on this risk-off sentiment day, and apparently that's not the case, because if you look at Australian dollar versus other currency, it was actually being sold off. So the only thing we are fine again is because we pick a two commodity currency that hedge out each other in terms of a risk-off environment. And that's why I keep stress to you that once you understand the fundamental personality of currency pair, why do people buy it? In a microeconomic point of view. If you understand that, then you will understand how to pick currency pair in order to reduce the risk. So Aussie is the only currency that Australian dollar is stronger today is the New Zealand dollar. So that's why it was a very interesting lesson to learn. Euro Aussie, again, it's an update because Australian dollar is largely sold off today. Euro New Zealand also an update, and no surprise in this kind of risk off sentiment. Look at British pound. It's actually, again, we keep going up, and now we are really at this very critical support, as you can just see from the chart. So don't be surprised to see any rebound next week. Same thing as a cable, and pound Aussie, same thing as pound CAD, same thing as pound New Zealand, and pretty much same thing as pound yen. Yep. So am I going to buy British pound? I think I might if there's a good opportunity, but only if I'm pair it up with a much weaker currency. That means I'm not going to buy cable, because no matter how strong British pound is, I'm still more in favor of US dollar. And I might buy pound Swiss, I might buy pound CAD, and pound yen are all pretty good pair to get into, but not now because I don't see any signal right now. But that's the only thing I will actually buy British pound against. Let's keep going. Look at dollar Swiss. We have a very indecisive day. Really nothing much happening in US dollar today. Dollar CAD, another update. We're hitting almost closing above this 1.35 critical support. And as mentioned, I do actually looking in favor of US dollar versus Canadian dollar. And dollar yen hitting 106. And the thing about dollar yen is that whenever you want to buy Japanese yen, you have two choices. You can really either go to long-term time frame, such as weekly, or you want to go to a very short-term time frame, such as hourly. Now, the reason is because Japanese yen are hugely affected by the sentiment. And the sentiment, of course, is going to create a lot of huge swing. Now, what you want to do is to write down that sentiment and make some money. Right. So if you're right or wrong, you're always going to get in and out very fast. That's why you want to go with shorter time frame. Or you want to go with a very long-term time frame, such as weekly, so that you don't really care and pay much attention to that sentiment noises. You just completely ignore that. Then that will actually be two type of method you can avoid to get whipsawed into a Japanese yen pair. So Aussie, we just saw this, again, am I looking to sell Aussie dollar? Absolutely not, because I'm actually very bullish toward Aussie dollar in terms of the fundamental perspective. Aussie New Zealand and Aussie yen, it's all Australian dollar. It's a very good buy for me right now. CAD Swiss, we don't really have anything. A down day for Canadian dollar, and same as CAD yen. So CAD yen is actually not a bad pair to short, to be honest with you. We actually on this 79.50 critical support. And the only thing is that if you are doing a longer time frame and you sell CAD yen, then you have to know that you are going against the fundamental, basically. Or I shouldn't say that. You should say that you're going against the interest rate, because you have to pay interest rate if you are selling Canadian dollar, buying Japanese yen, right? You always have to pay interest rate if you are buying a weaker one. So that's the only thing I don't like to sell CAD against yen. So if I want to sell CAD, I really want to pick something that has a higher interest rate. I probably buy dollar Aussie CAD I probably buy New Z CAD, which I also can hedge out because they both are commodity pair. And I also probably will buy dollar CAD. So those are the things that the pair I will combine with. Take a look at New Zealand dollar, New Z Swiss, another down day for New Zealand dollar. No surprise, it's a risk-off sentiment day. And so again, we don't have any entry, and normally I don't like to enter anything on Friday. I can manage things through the weekend, manage it. I'm fine to hold position over the weekend, but I don't want to enter any new position on Friday. It just, you have less control basically over the weekend. So let's take a look at weekly. Okay, weekly. So when I look at the weekly, again, it's the same thing as daily. They are all long-term perspective. You're always trying to have a very solid fundamental view. The only difference is that you're not paying too much attention to the risk events or what's about to come up next week, unless it's a very important thing like a US election. Otherwise, when you're doing the weekly, you really want to look at the fundamental, the economic point of view of the country. And you only want to buy a currency that is really strong versus the one that's really weak. And that's in the economic point of view, fundamental point of view, and also the interest rate. So you have to take into consideration when you're doing a weekly trade, because every candle is a week. So most likely you're going to hold month. Now, if you're going to hold a month, you don't want to keep paying interest rate. So I'm not going to look at 28 pair, because for weekly, I'm really just going to look at the pair that makes sense. So for example, if I want to say, okay, let's look at euro dollar. I'm already know that I'm not going to buy euro dollar at all. I'm only going to sell it. So what am I going to sell against? I'm not going to sell against euro Swiss, because the Swiss franc has these SMB interventions that I don't want to put myself in that position. I want to sell against British pound, US dollar, Australian dollar, and New Zealand dollar. I'm not going to sell against Canadian dollar because I don't have enough confidence toward oil market. I'm not going to sell against Japanese yen because Japanese yen has, if I remember correctly, has a negative interest, has a lower interest rate than euro dollar, or not. Let me quickly take a look. I don't remember if it has a lower interest rate or higher. I'm just quickly going to Forex Factory that you can see right here. Okay, so Japanese yen actually have a lower interest rate than euro dollar. Okay, then yeah, you can actually hedge against Japanese yen as well. So take a look at that. Euro pound. Again, this is a very good candle. Unfortunately, that's already passed, right? That's last week. And we are not going to enter anything last week due to the big risk events, right? So big drop today, really nothing on my signal, but it's just showing that, hey, it's a good sign that really euro is very weak at this point. Euro dollar, pretty much the same thing, but it's actually a pretty good signal, to be honest with you. It's a huge bearish engulfing. And another thing is that when you're doing a weekly trade, you're not too concerned about you're actually paying more attention to the candlestick itself, because each candle represents a wick, so it has more volume, it can tell you more things basically. So of course we always want to find something like this nice kangaroo tail, but if you're doing weekly, any bullish candle, it doesn't have to be perfect, it can do the trick. But of course, right now you just have to know that you are really at this basically historical low. You don't really have much going on if you short euro dollar. You have one profit at 1005, another one at 100375. That's probably the best outcome you have, but your stop loss is probably above this candle or at this swing high, so you don't really not even have one-on-one. So for me, not really a good position to enter. Euro Aussie on the other hand has way much more room to drop, so I'm actually looking forward to it, but I don't have any signal today or this week, so I'm just gonna skip it. And Euro New Z, same thing as Aussie, actually not bad to enter because you still have a lot of downside to go, but I don't have any signal for this week, so again going to wait. And Euro Yen, finally, it again don't have any signal, but same thing, you have more room to go downside, so pretty good to sell. Now let's look at British pound again. If I'm going to buy British pound, I'm definitely not going to buy against something that's stronger or relatively the same. So I'm not going to buy with US dollar or Australian dollar. I'm actually only going to do with pound Swiss, pound CAD, and pound yen. So pound Swiss, as you see, have a lot of upside to go. But again, you have to understand you are really riding British pound as a sentiment play, and things might change. But nevertheless, I don't really have signal this week. And buying against Canadian dollar might not be wise. Let me take a look at interest rate first. So Canadian dollar actually have higher interest rate than British pound. So I'm not going to buy against Canadian dollar. That leaves me with pound yen only. And pound yen, again, you have a lot of room to go upside. So pound yen, it's actually not bad actually to get into this trade. But again, I need to wait for a signal to enter it. And then Swiss franc, I'm not going to buy, so I'm just gonna pair with something else. US dollar, again, I'm really looking forward to buy it. So let's take a look at that. So dollar Swiss, again, have lots of room to go upside. And is that a good signal? Not really perfect for me. I don't really see anything. It's more like a range bound for me. But dollar CAD is already taking off. A very good bullish signal. That's definitely the case. And we have more room to go. So yeah, I'm actually tempting for this one. I mean, normally I'd really like to buy at the low, so you have, always buy low and sell high. I don't really like to buy at the breakout, but it's really not a bad spot in terms of weekly trade. But nevertheless, I know myself very well that if I enter this trade, I will be very nervous just because I'm not buying at low. So I know that's a psychological factor, but if I'm already know myself, then I definitely don't want to go against my own psychology, because that will actually do me disservice. I know that I will not be able to hold it if I'm not comfortable to enter this trade. All right, a lot of people say that you have to, suck it up. You gotta, go through, fight it. It actually doesn't work that way. You can never actually against your own emotion. All you can do is managing it and work with it. You gotta understand, emotion, you can work with it. It's like if you're having a bad day, keep telling yourself or forcing a smile, saying, I'm not mad. I have a good day. I have a good day. I'm happy. It's not gonna change your mood. Rather, you can acknowledge saying that, yes, I had a bad day because certain things happen. But hey, you know what? It's not the end of the world. It's definitely not a perfect day for me. But, let me try to be positive. That's actually work better than just trying to force yourself to smile. So dollar yen, again, a very good pair to long. Same thing apply. I just don't like to buy at this kind of breakout right now. You are really buying at this kind of resistance area. So that's the only reason I don't like to buying dollar yen. But on the contrary, this is still a whole range box basically. So actually, it's actually not a bad position to get into a weekly dollar yen trade. So I might consider for it actually, just because it's actually a very strong signal. And if holding dollar yen versus dollar CAD, because dollar CAD, the high is 1.75, right? So if you're getting here, your stop loss is here, you have probably 122, 123, 124. Dollar yen, on the other hand, has a much higher room to go. But anyway, I'll take a look. I'll do some analysis, see if I'm going to enter this few. Now, Australian dollar, Aussie Swiss, not Aussie dollar, Aussie CAD are all on my plate of consideration. Aussie New Zealand, which I'm already in my daily trade, and Aussie yen. Now, I can understand that I never want to enter the same trade twice. Now, back then I used to do a different strategy in different time frame. But you can understand that it's not about the strategy, it's about your analysis. So why do you enter this trade? Do you enter because of the fundamental point of view? Or do you enter because the sentiment? Or do you enter purely because the technical analysis? And they are all right. There's nothing better than the other one. But if you enter a trade because the fundamental, then you don't want to enter it twice. If you enter let's say if you enter a trade because the technical analysis, you say, okay, I'm entering this weekly trade because I have a green candle above 200-day EMA. Okay, let's just say it's a simple strategy. Then you don't want to go to daily and do the same thing, or go to hourly and do the same thing, because essentially you are over leveraged in one single currency with the same type of analysis. So that's, for me, it's a lot of risk to do that. So I'm not thinking to buy Australian dollar right now in weekly, because I'm already had a long Australian dollar trade against New Zealand dollar due to the fundamental perspective. And that's why I'm just doing it to show you. But even today, I have a signal that's saying Aussie CAD. I'm still not going to enter it because I know this is a too fundamental trade to over leverage for me. So CAD Swiss and CAD Yang, I have nothing going on here. New Z Swiss, looking forward to buy, but I don't have anything. And New Z CAD will be a good pair to buy as well. And finally, it's New Z Yen. It's another good pair to buy. But again, I don't have too much going on. I have to wait for signal, but all these are pretty good. So right now, really on my watch list is perhaps dollar CAD and dollar Yen, because they both have a pretty solid week, and they both are looking like they are going to keep going up. And the Canadian dollar and Japanese yen are both very bearish, fundamentally speaking. But I just don't like to buy it at the breakout. So I will see which I'm going to enter. But nevertheless, I'm only going to pick one. Again, it's a fundamental perspective. In fundamental perspective, you buy one currency, you don't want to buy it twice, even though it's within different pair. Okay, guys, that's it really for this week. And I know it's been a roller coaster week for me personally because of the election. Although it turned out to be well, but definitely very tired emotionally. So I will see you next week, maybe Monday, for another daily analysis. Other than that, really try to enjoy the week. And again, some of you are very disappointed because the election result. I certainly understand that emotion. So really take this weekend just to have fun, try to relax, try to remain hopeful, I guess, remain hopeful for the future. And if it will help you better, really try to read some history, then you'll know that it's really not that bad. Donald Trump is definitely not Hitler or Mussolini, things like that. So try to remain hopeful, and the world is still going to keep going, keep functioning. All right, have a great weekend. Thank you very much for your watching. Again, have any question, comment, feel free to write below. Otherwise, I will see you next week. Bye bye.